Well, I'm in Psalm chapter 8, if you want to turn there, Psalms 8 and 9. And Psalms being 19th book. And Psalm 9 would be William Branham's birth, 1909. But he's inside his mother, like Jeremiah and the prophets, talking about how God knew them before they were even born. So in Psalm 8, I want you to read something that's repeated in the book of Hebrews in verse 5. And what it says, for thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor. It's talking about man himself, but we're talking about William Branham in particular. In verse 6, it said he'd have dominion. Verse 7 says, over the beast of the field. And notice that in verse 8, it includes the fish of the sea. Now, what do you know? William Branham was a great hunter and a great fisherman. And if you'll go online, you can actually see someone showing you all of the game and fish mounted on the wall in his home in Tucson, Arizona. He is born in 1909. In chapter 9, verse 9, it says the Lord also will be a refuge for who? For the oppressed. Now notice what it says in verse 18. For the needy shall not always be forgotten. The expectation of the poor shall not perish forever. So here comes William Branham the prophet, not born in a rich mansion, but born in a log cabin in Burksville, not far from Burksville. And he always cared about the poor. I want you to turn to 1 Peter chapter 4, because we're going to repeat the same years we just looked at. But this is on the modern chronology, which we use in the Infinity Code. And there's several people could teach you that if you're not aware of it. In 1 Peter chapter 5, our modern chronology matching Psalms, in other words, we're at the same chapter, 487, in 1 Peter 5, that you would get in Psalms. Now, the whole idea here is that God, knowing that he was making William Branham inside his 15-year-old mother, notice what we find in 1 Peter chapter 4. Because what is he? He's inside his mother forming. 1 Peter chapter 4 is our pattern for the modern chronology, 1908. In verse 10, it says, minister. In verse 11, if any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. That's exactly what William Branham did. In verse 17, it says, for the time has come that judgment must begin at the house of God. And a lot of Pentecostal people could not stand the straight preaching of the prophet of God. But here's the big one, verse 19. I'm in 1 Peter chapter 4. It's a 1908 chapter, and this is what it says. Wherefore, let them that suffer according to the will, like in William, will of God, commit the keeping of the souls to him in well-doing, as unto, what's this? A faithful creator with a capital C, talking about Jesus. But the only prophet of God I ever heard of, ever researched, who actually created squirrels twice in 1959, once in Indiana, once in Kentucky, shot them and ate them. Look, this has so many applications here with creator, because God is creating William Branham. Let's go to the 1909 chapter and verse 1. it says the elders and also an elder. That means the older person. But the big line is in verse 4. And when the chief shepherd shall appear, this is a reference to Jesus Christ appearing as the chief shepherd. But it's a 1909 chapter, and in an application, it's referring to William Branham, and you cannot top his ministry. It said the chief shepherd shall appear. Verse 5 and 6 are a description of William Branham in no uncertain terms, because it says humility and humble 2 times. And what a humble man. If you'll listen to something we discovered this week, and I shared it with friends, if William Branham is born in 1909, 1 Peter chapter 5, he has his first vision that he tells his mother in 1912. So I simply said, let me turn 3 chapters over. We're still dealing with Simon Peter, and it'll take us to 2 Peter chapter 3. Notice how things line up. William Branham is 3 years old, and he tells his mother a vision. Can you imagine a 3-year-old telling their vision? And he said they were going to move. And listen to what he said. He did not say the name of the town because it could be self-fulfilling. He said, when we get there, the town beside it will be called New Albany. Notice I turned 3 chapters. I'm in 2 Peter chapter 3. We've used this in past Bible studies, but in verse 13, nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth. He said that the town would be called New Albany. So he's having a vision and telling his mother that when they move, they're going to live beside the town New Albany. And of course, in later years, there wasn't even a bridge across the river yet. They moved to Jeffersonville, Indiana, and the town beside it is New Albany. I find this very interesting, especially since I'm from the town of St. Albans. Now, in the beginning of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, I always wondered about the genealogy. Matthew has a genealogy, and Dr. Luke has a genealogy, but they do not start at the same place. If you're making notes, you can check it out later. But let's see how this generation list begins in Matthew chapter 1. The first verse says, the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, and he's saying that he's the son of David, but also the son of Abraham. In verse 2, this genealogy starts with Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, Jacob, and so forth. Now, wait a minute. The genealogy in the book of Luke goes all the way back to Adam. Now, how interesting that Matthew, the publican, Matthew decided to do his genealogy from Abraham. Now, he had the records because he was a tax collector. Luke had the records because he is a doctor. Now, you see why God called Matthew, who was formerly called Levi. But now, guess what? For those of you that have been in the Bible studies with me, Matthew chapter 1 has an application, a prophetic application to 1943. Well, guess what? Now we're in the life of William Branham. Told it before, going to tell you again. In chapter 4, he's tempted by the devil. And what year is it? It's 1946. This chronology be hidden from modern preachers and, of course, the ignorant denominations. Verse 11, I'm in Matthew chapter 4, a 1946 chapter. Then the devil leaveth him, and behold, I hope you marked this in your Bible, angels came and ministered unto him. William Branham was in a cave in 1946, fasting to the death until an angel appeared and gave him his commission. Think about that. Perfect. And of course, the rest of chapter 4, off he goes with a great healing ministry immediately. And that's what William Branham did when he came out of that cave. Chapter 8, verse 11, I say unto you that many shall come from the east and the west. That means east and west of Jerusalem and Israel. And they shall sit down with Abraham. You can get the word Branham out of Abraham, and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. And he's saying in the next verse that the children of Israel will be cast out. Now, in Matthew 23, there's something a little interesting because it's a 1965 chapter. And I'm going to quote John Todd, the witch, that met William Branham one time. And William Branham told him that he would get converted because he said, you witches think you're so smart hanging around the churches. He said, God's going to get a hold of you one day and you're going to tell all. And everything I know about witchcraft and the Masons, I learned from John Todd on cassette tapes after he was converted. But in chapter 23, Jesus upbraids the hypocrites of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. But at the end of the chapter, he's saying, I will send you prophets and wise men. I'm in verse 34. I'm in Matthew 23:34. I'll send you wise men and prophets and scribes, and some of them you will kill. Now, why did I say that? Why did I mention John Todd? Now, in verse 35, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom you slew between the temple and the altar. And of course, that is John the Baptist's father. Verse 36, listen to me. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. John Todd said that William Branham was murdered, and the psychiatrist set up the boy who drove the car with one headlight into William Branham to cause the accident. So, if so, it would fit because this is a 1965 chapter unknown to the blind Pharisees. I found something stupendous about William Branham being up on the mountain, the Catalina Mountains, Sunset Mountain, and when he's up there above Sapino Canyon, there are strange things that happened in 1963. They will continue. Going up to the mountain and strange things happening. Now, he was up there in 63. Some of the brothers went up there with him. They camped with him. He'd go hunting. So I'm taking a look at Matthew 21, which is the year 1963. And it doesn't get any better than this. I think a lady took some photographs up there. And they didn't notice it for a while. They're photographing exactly where William Branham, where he camped, where he stood on the rock, where he had where they had the fire to cook outdoors. This is where the explosion took place up there, which is in one of William Branham's visions. But you listen carefully to what I'm going to say. They rejected William Branham. Who rejected him? The United Pentecostal Church said no one was allowed to attend his meeting. Other preachers, the full gospel businessmen, began to make remarks. Gordon Lindsay, who wrote the first book about William Branham, was always making critical remarks. People like Kenneth Hagin and Kenneth Copeland and another Anna who did prophecies that were correct on William Branham in the beginning, they started turning against him. He was rejected by America. Can you believe that God sent an apostle? Saw Jesus Christ talk to him on at least 2 occasions. That they sent a prophet like none other, and America rejected him, and the religious people rejected him, and even the Pentecostals rejected him. Now, when they took photographs, not exactly that year, but they're looking at him the next year, and lo and behold, up on the mountain at a distance is William Branham's face and head at the top corner of a mountain. And it's an exact facsimile of him. I'm talking better than what people will do when they drive to see the presidents chiseled out in stone. It's better. It looks closer. What chapter are we in? We're in Matthew 21. What year is it? 1963. Listen to me carefully. Verse 42. I hope you circle it. Jesus saith unto them, and he's quoting Psalm 118, which is actually the year 2018. Jesus saith unto them, did you ever read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, the same is become what? The head of the corner. If you haven't seen it before, get Perry Green's video and look off into the distance. He's up there showing people where William Branham did things, and then he points off to this stone face, which is on the top corner of a mountain. I'm going to read it again. It doesn't get more exact. The stone which the builders rejected, the same is become the head of the corner. I like the ending on this verse. This is the Lord's doing. How do you like this? And it is marvelous to our eyes. This we discovered in the past week. Now, some of us are planning to go to Tucson, and we're going to go up on Sunset Mountain. We're going to go up there to Sabino Canyon, and we're going to go over there and get the best photos we can of the face of William Branham. When was it put there? At the creation of the earth. Think about it. Knowing full well that they would reject a prophet that he sent who could tell people their first name, their last name, their street address, their city, and why they wanted prayed for, and never failed one time in this country, in Germany, in South Africa. And what they do? They had no use for him. This is Mr. A. Thanks for listening. Please send me a comment. Thank you.
I was born in eastern Kentucky in a little log cabin near Burkesville, Kentucky. The morning of my birth, I'm told of my parents that there was a light came into the room and hung over me. My people was not a religious people. They did not go to any church. Of course, this caused quite a stir among them. It's followed me all the days of my life. Recently, they took a picture of it in the scientific world, as shown here. You're probably familiar with this picture. It was proven by science that it was the only supernatural being that was ever scientifically photographed. To my opinion, it's the same angel of God that followed the children of Israel. Now we are be strangers. I see that you are strictly a stranger to me. You're from away from here. You come from another city. You've got a lot of trouble on your heart. You got hard trouble to begin with. Is that right? There's a whole lot of blackness. I see a black sheep keep following you like that. Oh, it's a lie. Somebody's told a lie on you. And that was a man who was professing divine healing. He said you was a witch. Is that true? And you got a whole stir in your church or something other about it, isn't that right? Your pastor's sick right now. He's got polio. Is that right? Sister, don't pay no attention to what them people tell you. They're lying. And the only thing's wrong with your heart is that nervous condition got your heart worked up. Go on home in peace, and God bless you. You're all right. God bless you. You're not a witch.